Good Friday afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Virginia Transit Association's webinar, Legislative Briefing 2022, Part 2. So thank you for being here today. So if you're a follower of the daily news on VPAP, Virginia Public Access Project, you may have seen that today is VTA Sponsorship Day. Our message out to thousands of readers is standing up for Virginia's transit providers who move our people, our economy, and our environment forward. I'm Lisa Guthrie, Executive Director of the Virginia Transit Association, and I'd like to thank our event sponsors who make this briefing possible and who will be our generous conference sponsors in June. Sunny Merriman, Keolis, National Express Transit, Equans, VIA, WSP, Kimley Horn, and Transurban. We appreciate your support. So, as you know, we are in the midst of the 2022 General Assembly session, and we're heading toward crossover, which is Tuesday. That's the midway point. That's when all the business for the House of Origin has to be completed before it goes to the other chamber. In our webinar last month, we reviewed VTA's legislative priorities and heard from DRPT Director Jennifer Mitchell and some legislators who are patroning our priority legislation. For this month, we invited our new Secretary of Transportation, Shep Miller, and Deputy Secretary Jen Deci to join us to share their vision for transit in the new administration. Unfortunately, Secretary Miller had to cancel due to a conflict that had arisen, but we're very pleased that Deputy Secretary Deci is here with us today. And also with us is, to help lead today's discussion, is our VTA Legislative Committee Chairman, Greg Potts of WMATA. We hope that you'll have questions for Ms. Deci and we'll submit them through the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. VTA is recording this webinar and will make it available on our website for on-demand viewing. Questions will be answered at the end, but you can submit your questions anytime and we'll hold them for you. Remember that the audience is muted, so we'll be unable to hear you during the webinar. Danny Plogger, VTA's Deputy Director, is our Zoom master today. So we have until 1:25 with Deputy Secretary Deci. So we're going to get right to it. I'm going to turn things over to you now, Greg.
Thank you, Lisa, and hello, everybody. Very pleased to introduce Deputy Secretary Deci. I know that she has to jump, I think, at 1:25, so I'll try to keep the intro brief. I think everyone knows that she was recently appointed by Governor Youngkin as Deputy Secretary of Transportation. She comes to the Commonwealth with almost a decade of experience on Capitol Hill, largely focusing on transportation policy. She was senior counsel on the Senate Finance Committee. And for the ranking member, Mike Crapo, she was working primarily on infrastructure issues. Prior to finance, she worked as senior professional staff on the Senate Banking Committee for Chairs Crapo and Shelby, and she was focusing on infrastructure. In that capacity, she advised the chairman and Senate Republicans on legislative, budgetary, and regulatory guidance involving transportation policy. And she did play a critical role in crafting bipartisan public transportation provisions in the FAST Act, as well as COVID relief packages and infrastructure investment. So quite a bit of experience on the Hill for sure. When she was working on the Hill, she earned her JD from the Catholic University of America, and she's a member of the Commonwealth of Virginia Bar. And of course, I think a lot of you know her from her days at the NVTC, at the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, where she worked on transit issues there in Northern Virginia. That was a very quick bio for you, Jen. If there's anything else that you wanted to add a little bit about your story and your new position, I think you've been on the job now for roughly 3 weeks, I want to say. So you're very, very new to the job.
I don't know, I'm seasoned around here. It's, I don't know, General Assembly days, I think the governor keeps saying it feels like it's been 3 minutes or 3 years. It's been quite a couple of weeks and quite an immersive experience. But thanks Lisa for having me and Greg for the intro. Like you guys said, I was with Northern Virginia Transportation Commission for a year after we passed the FAST Act in DC in 2015. So I was there 2016 until Senator Mike Crapo took over the Banking Committee and offered me the opportunity to come back and lead a number of portfolios for him. So excited to be here in Virginia, getting through General Assembly session, as Lisa noted. getting to cross over next week has been an immersive experience for all of us, getting finding our desks as well as wandering around the General Assembly building. But really excited to be here, excited to be learning more about the transit issues that Virginia is facing at the moment, getting y'all's priorities. Part of the reason that I'm here is because of my extensive federal background. I'm leading all infrastructure efforts for the administration on the IIJA, the federal law that just passed. So coordinating efforts across secretariats here and going through with a number of our divisions, including DRPT and VPRA, their priorities as we start to look at federal discretionary grants. We are getting quite a bit of formula funds and other more guaranteed increases in funding. And so I think from our perspective, this administration feels very strongly that if there's money out there available to go after from a discretionary perspective, that's absolutely what we need to be doing. And so Secretary Miller said the other day in the General Assembly that he intends for us to go after more than our fair share of discretionary amounts. So looking forward to working with you all and hearing what some of the needs are here. Greg, was that too much of an introduction, or
no, that's great.
Keep going,
yeah.
but yeah.
No, that's great.
Okay.
Yes, why don't we just jump in? So it's still early days, of course, in the administration, and we were just kind of wondering if there's any themes that are going to be emerging and anything you can tell us about what to expect over the next few years.
Yeah. I think one thing, and one of the things that was so exciting to me about coming to work for Governor Youngkin, old ways, for Governor Youngkin, as well as his chief of staff, Jeff Getman, is they are private equity guys, which is interesting to me because what they do in their entire careers is they see something with potential and that isn't being maximized yet, and they go in and they identify what works and what doesn't, and they find a way to turn that asset around. I think that transit is a great opportunity to build and to maximize our potential. These guys are really into metrics. So looking into performance, not just in the short term, but over the longer term to ensure that we're getting a solid ROI on particularly the Commonwealth's use of the Commonwealth's dollars. So I think, going through figuring out what projects are going to bring not only the best mobility opportunities, but also economic development opportunities and ways that we can show off the state of Virginia. I think the First Lady continues to say that Virginia doesn't show off enough and doesn't, we're not loud and proud about some of the amazing things that we're doing. And so I know, in the short term, my relationships with the federal government, we've got great opportunities to show Secretary Buttigieg some of the things we have going on. He's right across the river. And so, it's an easy press stop for him to come and see some of the great things that we're working on. So I think, maximizing, first of all, telling everybody the great things that we're doing, and then figuring out how to maximize not only the state and local funds, but really to leverage federal funds and discretionary opportunities is going to be definitely the first half of this year, a major priority for us.
All right, great. Switching gears over to COVID, how do you think that recovery from the COVID pandemic might be a part of transportation policy decisions?
Yeah, I think so. Working on Capitol Hill during COVID was certainly an interesting time. I was at the Banking Committee, which is jurisdiction over transit. March of 2020. First, Capitol Hill doesn't work remotely prior to March 2022. So switching to remote and then writing the CARES Act and the American Recovery Plan and some of those other supplemental appropriations funds just to kind of stop the bleeding. It was the first time that as a nation, it wasn't just the housing industry or, it wasn't a specific industry. It was literally the entire nation's economy. And so we were kind of scrambling to do what was best, particularly in the CARES Act. And so some of those, bills that came afterwards were meant to kind of tweak some of the policies that we had to quickly get out the door in an unprecedented way. I think that the COVID effects on ridership, particularly for transit, but also for highways, is going to be an interesting opportunity for us. In my mind, we have a changing mobility landscape. COVID is changing employers' ways of thinking about where their employees need to be, whether it's in the office, whether it's in the same state or country. And so thinking through, while ridership is rebounding, but slowly and still far lower than it was prior to the pandemic, thinking through if there are ways that we can think more creatively about providing the service that people want to see. And so that may look a little bit different than a 45-foot bus going once an hour. Maybe it's talking about changing it to 16-passenger van twice an hour, things like that. But we need to start thinking more creatively and innovatively about provision of our services.
All right, great, thanks. You've obviously got experience working in transit, worked for NVTC for a little while. How do you think that your experience working in transit in Virginia could help to shape the move towards multimodal transportation?
Yeah, no, I think you guys are fortunate to have someone here that knows as much about transit as I do. I know my fellow Deputy Secretary, John Lawson, is a longtime VDOT guy and very smart CPA who knows lots of numbers things. And so, but his career's focus has been largely on highways. And so I think it's a really great opportunity for us to have someone who understands the value of transit. And I am here to maximize that value. And so I hope that all of you can come to me with your ideas. My door is always open. One of the advantages that I've had so far in the short 3 weeks that I've been here is knowing some of the career staff and some of the division heads, as well as I do from my previous role, both at NVTC and on Capitol Hill, has been great to have that sort of candid conversations with folks. Similarly, I've had relationships with former NVTC commissioners and current NVTC commissioners that are down here in Richmond during the General Assembly session, which has been wonderful to have those sorts of relationships coming in. It makes getting settled a little bit easier, but it also it presents the opportunity to share my perspective with them on some of the deep, weedsy transit policy things that I've been brewing up in my head up in the U.S. Senate for a number of years, and I'm looking forward to working with you all to implement.
Sounds good. Did want to hit very briefly on zero emissions bus. I think that a lot of agencies are starting that transition. They've set some goals, and I think you're aware that Senator McClellan has a bill that passed in the Senate. It's SB 488, and it's also a VTA initiative. It sets up a fund to support that transition. And of course, it's going to be really critical for all the agencies around Virginia to partner with the Commonwealth and the local jurisdictions, not just on the bus procurement, but also on the infrastructure upgrades. So just wondering your thoughts on this topic, because it's kind of a big topic among our community, and if you can share anything on the administration's point of view on this.
You're selling it short a little bit. I back in 2015, my boss at the time, a Republican from Alabama, Senator Shelby, gave me direction to write a zero emission bus program for transit. And so what started over the last 5 years as a $55 million a year carve out of the buses and bus facilities program now has $5.6 billion in it. So certainly, that's far more money than we have available. The manufacturers are not quite there to spend all of that quite yet, but it certainly shows and Congress's priority is moving us in that direction. You'll see in that new IIJA bill a couple of provisions that we put into place to make sure that we're deploying these correctly and efficiently. I spoke at a zero emission bus conference once, and a man stood up on the stage and said that their agency had purchased a zero emission bus, and when it arrived, they realized they had not ordered a charger for it. So I don't know how that wasn't a feature of the, before you check out, did you forget? But we, as a result of that, have really realized, if you want to do a research or a demonstration project, there's money available to you through the research and demonstration project funds, the 5312 funds. if we are hopeful that with this 5339, the NOLO program, that when folks are buying those buses, they have a plan, and it may only be one or two, but they have a plan to convert their fleet or to increase their availability of, and an important point of that is not only zero emission, but we've been a little bit frustrated at the federal level over it being low emission as well. Our hope there was some localities can't afford to make that transition straight from diesel bus to zero emission bus. And so it may not look like everyone wants it to, but a CNG or a hybrid bus is still reducing emissions in parts of the country that may not yet be available, may not be ready to deploy zero emission. Another bill that's going on down here in the Senate or in the General Assembly is related to the bus procurement issue that was affecting the state's purchasing of or procurement schedules. Homer, Carlisle, and I in the Senate feel like it's very important that transit thinks about how we do procurements differently. There's lots of onesies and twosies and, one-off procurements that, from a transit bus perspective, they have to set up, the manufacturer has to set up the entire line to deliver on and those sorts of things. And it's expensive and it's inefficient. And so we put a provision in there that says, if you're buying buses, you have to tell us why you couldn't do it in an innovative way, which might mean partnering with a, fellow bus agency nearby. It might be buying through a state schedule, whether it's Virginia's, which hopefully we get that provision through the General Assembly here. But it could be off of someone else's. It could be off of Washington State's, California's, but trying to kind of create economies of scale. And so rather than just buying one or two buses, you're able to buy off a contract that's buying 400 buses, and all of a sudden you're seeing efficiencies there. I think the other aspect of that is knowing that you all are trying to figure all of this out. You guys are also providing service, trying to get ridership back into your systems. Part of that joint procurement or buying off a state procurement is intended to alleviate some of the administrative burden on you as providers, and so that you can focus on your service if someone else is making sure they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's on the actual procurement process itself.
All right, thanks for that. So I think I'm going to kick it back to Lisa now for a few other questions.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Looking at the questions, recognizing we only have a few more minutes here with you. Looking at the questions, one of them referenced Governor Youngkin's videotaped presentation to VTA last September during our annual conference, where he expressed his support for continued investment. And now Governor Youngkin is leading the effort to eliminate the grocery tax, which will substantially reduce funding for transit. So we've raised this issue with a number of legislators. While we recognize that there will be some federal funding or a generous amount of federal funding for the next few years, it's not exactly open-ended. There are some conditions on how it would be used. Also requires a local match usually, and in its place, we're losing a dedicated source of revenue, which is about $135 million a year for transportation and 15.2 for transit. So anyway, any thoughts about, have there been any discussions about how that revenue will be replenished during the next few years?
I think yes, is the answer. We're very aware of the effects of the grocery tax and what effects it will have on transportation. I think we're about to see the budget process kick off in earnest here in Richmond over the next couple of weeks. I think there'll be a series of amendments. There will be additions and subtractions from, currently we are operating off the proposed budget by the previous administration. And so I think you'll see some changes to what might be currently out there in terms of what the funding sources all look like. And so very aware of that and conscious of that as we're moving forward throughout the remainder of the session.
Thank you. And one more question pertains to the critical bus operator shortage. Any thoughts about how we can better address that need? A lot of different agencies are are offering bonuses, reaching into their available resources to try to get recruit and retain bus operators and mechanics. So any thoughts about that? Or we do have a couple of budget amendments to use maybe some of the ARPA funds for that have not been considered yet. But any comments on the bus operator shortage?
Yeah, it's not just bus operators, and to your point about mechanics and others, but we're particularly, there are a number of bills going through the General Assembly right now related to CDL, commercial driver's licenses, and the ability to obtain those through kind of creative alternative places rather than just the DMV, in order to expedite the ability for folks interested to get onto the to get behind the wheel, to make sure that they get through the process efficiently and effectively. Would be happy to talk with you all about ideas such as similar to that for transit bus operators. We are certainly interested in making sure that we have a workforce here in Virginia that is here to stay and here to work. And so we would love to talk with you all about creative ideas to increase the availability of transit workers.
Now, we have reached out to an organization called Virginia Ready. It was featured in the paper this week, how they're helping truck drivers try to recruit truck drivers for CDL training at community colleges. So we have a conversation set up with that organization to see if they might also consider bus drivers. So anyway, would look forward to working with you on that and trying to find some creative ways to address this. So any final words, Jen, before you have to hop off? We really appreciate you being here today. And we know you've got a busy schedule and another meeting coming up, but you've got some very creative ideas, and I think a lot of energy going forward, and a host of experiences that will help you work in the transit space. And we look forward to working with you.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm here to help. I'm here to work with you all collaboratively. My email is jen.dc@governor.virginia.gov. Spread it around. I'm happy to talk with everybody. Want this to be an open dialogue. Want to have relationships with you all once General Assembly ends. Hopefully have some time to get back up to Northern Virginia. I have lived in that area for about a decade, so this is my first 3 weeks as a Richmond resident, still in the process of moving, but so I'll be up there quite a bit, and really hope I look forward to working with all of you and meeting you guys up there and seeing the service that you're providing.
Well, I hope you can come to our conference, which will be June 1st and 2nd in Roanoke. So
I'll do my best. Although the last time I was in Roanoke was to take the Virginia bar exam, which was not my favorite experience. So
we'll see. Have to change that for you. Yeah.
I have a little PTSD. So.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I'm going to ask everybody to stay on for a few minutes to talk about the status of some of the legislation, if people have time for that. But again, we thank you, and we welcome you to Richmond, and we will look forward to working with you going forward.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here, and good luck. Talk to y'all soon.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Okay, there was a question about the procurement bill that came up in the chat. I don't know about a budget amendment. I had not noticed that. The bill is Senate Bill 281 that addresses the procurement resolution to try to bring the federal and state procurement policies together so that they are not in conflict with one another, and procurement can continue. So anyway, with that, just a couple other things that I'm looking at, some other questions. I'm sorry we didn't have time to ask her all of your questions. We were certainly curtailed there, but maybe we can type these up and send them to her to see if we can get a response. So anyway, I think that we are moving on. As we mentioned, crossover is Tuesday, and we have some success stories. Others it's going to have to be an assortment of different measures to replace some funding. As we mentioned, the grocery tax elimination or curtailment, I don't know that it would be completely eliminated. Last night in Senate Finance, they took up a number of those bills and moved them into Senator Boysko's bill so that it addresses groceries and hygiene issues and hygiene products. And anyway, it's moving forward. The explanation in the committee was that they intend to retain the 1% to go back to localities for the local share of the grocery sales tax. The education piece of that, the other 1%, would be somehow taken out of the general fund, and it would still be allocated just like it is now on a per pupil basis, not on local composite index. There was a lot of concern from some of the senators about that, especially from Northern Virginia, because if it's based on local composite index or ability to pay, Northern Virginia would lose out. There was nothing said about transportation. So I know that a number of them are very concerned about that. They just feel that they must do something because it was in Governor Northam's introduced budget. So they are just going to have to figure out a revenue source, if not this session, next session. We do have additional funding from additional revenues that have been collected over and above the projections. We also have some of this federal funding that will hopefully be coming in once they get the authorization at the federal level for that. So that is, as I mentioned to Jen Deci, that is not unrestricted. It would be primarily, especially for the large urban systems, primarily capital, and there will be a local match. So anyway, we will continue to monitor that, and I thank all of you who have raised the issue with your legislators that we can't forget about transportation, because especially most recently in 2020, we considered it a win to restructure the funding process so that transit got 23% of the transportation trust fund. So we don't want to roll back that progress. So anyway, that's where things are with that. The gas tax is not going forward, so at least we won't have that. That was a 1-year rollback of the 5-cent increase from last July. So it doesn't look like that's going to move forward. On our other initiatives, I'm happy to report that the trip bills moved through their respective chambers. That was Senator George Barker's Senate Bill 342 and Delegate Dolores McQuinn's House Bill 142. They're slightly different. These were the bills that kind of balanced out the two components of the TRIP program, the Transit Ridership Incentive Program. So rather than being so lopsided toward regional connectivity, now it's pretty much evened out between that and the free and reduced fare for low income. Jennifer McClellan's Transit Zero Emission Transition Fund bill is moving forward, although as it stands now, it has no funding source. Senate Bill 488, we had a component in there that it would have taken 5.5% of the sports betting revenues to go toward it, but that was carved out. So we're hoping that Senate Finance will find some additional funds to replace that. Let's see, I see a note here from Jennifer DeBrule. There's language in both the biennial and caboose budgets to hopefully get procurement underway as soon as the budget is signed. So so that's great. I don't have a specific budget amendment number there, but it's good to hear that. Let's see. Then we've got, I think that's pretty much it. We've got some of those other initiatives like the CDL licensure that we're looking at. So anyway, if anybody else has any other things to share, please put it in the chat. Okay.
The gas tax
Okay.
legislation.
The gas tax?
Yeah, the House version is before appropriations this afternoon. The
Yes, it
Senate
is.
version died last evening.
Yeah, we expect that the House will be passing something more aligned with what the governor wanted. So, hopefully it'll be worked out so that, the Senate and House can come to agreement on that. This is the Durant bill, House Bill 978. That is, as far as I know, that's dead. That was the one that would have removed the recordation tax funding from HRT. As far as I know, that is dead. So anyway, again, I want to thank you all for all your efforts in the General Assembly and recognizing that your virtual lobbying and communications have been very effective, because I heard that from some of the senators that they had heard from some of our transit agencies.
And then,
So,
Lisa, I saw in the
Yeah.
chat, it looks like Ginger Ball put in there that the procurement item, it was in the governor's introduced budget, so it's not an
Okay.
amendment.
all right, very good. Okay, I don't see anything else. So anyway, we will continue to update you as some of these things are firmed up in the General Assembly once crossover is done and we start getting through some of the committee measures over on the second half. We'll have a better idea of what to expect. So stay tuned. So anyway, thank you all for participating and have a great weekend, great snowy weekend again, it looks like. So anyway, winter and the General Assembly will hopefully leave town at the same time. So thanks, guys.
And did you want to plug the conference, Lisa?
Toward the end, we have, again, we have our conference will be June 1st and 2nd. It will be a bus expo this year. The first day will be at the Berglund Center in Roanoke for the bus expo and board meeting. And on the second day, we'll be at the Hotel Roanoke, which is right next door. So we hope everybody will join us. We haven't been down to Roanoke area or Southwest Virginia in many a year, and we'll look forward to having our social get together at the Transportation Museum that evening and enjoy being together in person. So thank you all, and we'll see you then.
Registration is
everyone.
live.
All right, bye-bye.
Take care. Thanks.